This young man was naturally endowed with a greater awakening power than others. However, the first thing Kim SeoJoon had to do was to pay off all the debts left by his two deceased parents. 9 years passed by, and finally, he had managed to save up enough to enroll in the Hunter Academy he had always dreamed of. While browsing the internet one day, a sudden advertisement about the prestigious Supreme Academy caught Kim SeoJoon's eye, causing him to pause in disbelief. The video was filled with nothing but extravagant praises, painting a picture of boundless glory. Frustrated, he continued scrolling and stumbled upon another video featuring Jaehyun Daeseong, showcasing incredible skills and strength that left Kim SeoJoon gaping in awe. Out of curiosity, Kim SeoJoon clicked on the enrollment button, only to see a fee of $40,000 appear on the screen, exactly the amount he had saved. "Is this some kind of joke? Are they trying to deceive me?" he muttered, feeling conflicted about the materialistic decision that now occupied his thoughts. With that, he hastily exited the webpage, determined to focus on his work instead. Little did he know that life had other plans. All of Kim SeoJoon's hopes and dreams were shattered in a matter of seconds when a freak accident severed the monster's chain right above his head, leaving him severely injured. With medical expenses totaling $40,000, his bright future seemed to dim on his hospital bed. Left with only $3,000 in his pocket, borrowed from Uncle Manchel, Kim SeoJoon's phone suddenly buzzed with a notification about the Supreme Academy. To his surprise, the registration fee had dropped to $3,000. With nothing more to lose, he decided to take a leap of faith and tap the registration button. As he did, the envelope containing the money beside him slowly disappeared, startling him momentarily. After successfully becoming a member, a miniature figure on his person emitted a dazzling light from his phone, announcing itself as his mentor and guide. "I'm Mentor," the kid proudly declared, boasting about being the advisor in charge of teaching Kim SeoJoon. This revelation left Kim SeoJoon incredulous. Could there possibly be someone even more severely ill than he? Currently, Mentor informed Kim SeoJoon that the Supreme Academy is where teachers strive to surpass the limits of their own races. This revelation startled Kim SeoJoon. So, this is a school for superhumans, not hunters. What even are hunters then? Mentor hurriedly had Kim SeoJoon take a proficiency survey to determine his current inclinations. Shaking, Kim SeoJoon pressed without knowing how to answer the second question, lacking all the abilities at the moment. Mentor sighed deeply. "All right, this academy will tentatively accept you," Mentor said abruptly, then launched into a rapid-fire 180-question survey that made Kim SeoJoon feel like dying right then and there on the bed. After noticing that Kim SeoJoon's preferred combat style was tactics, Mentor contemplated and decided to assign Dongbang to him for tea training. Without delay, Mentor quickly showed Kim SeoJoon a lecture from Professor Boljo, leaving Kim SeoJoon stunned and questioning the meaning of life. What on earth? According to Mentor's words, Kim SeoJoon immediately pressed firmly into the lecture, steadfast in the professor's unwavering teaching. The image of Boljo and his echoing teachings immediately sent Kim SeoJoon into a dreamlike state, as if he had just bitten a stone, engrossed for a whole week. Suddenly, Kim SeoJoon's body completely recovered, surprising all the doctors with its newfound strength. Truly the power of Buddha. After experiencing this enlightenment, Kim SeoJoon felt like he had just achieved 1.3% of his progress. Immediately greedy, he decided to try Chirion's lecture next. Chirion, a centaur and the teacher of most heroes in the Jurisu mythology, excitedly lay down and chilled while listening. Suddenly, he loudly shouted, ordering Kim SeoJoon to quickly get up and move his hands and feet, making Kim SeoJoon startled, almost falling off the bed. At this moment, the phone screen suddenly displayed a notification about Kim SeoJoon's daily personal tasks. Immediately, Kim SeoJoon jumped into end tasks, physically tougher than usual. "It's too hard." Kim SeoJoon sighed deeply and stopped. However, despite pressing a few more times, the screen remained blank, forcing him to complete the tasks, making Kim SeoJoon feel like my mother was going to collapse. Kim SeoJoon reluctantly clicked back into Professor Boljo's lecture on the toolbar, only to be greeted by a notification about the task deadline. 83 days from now. It felt like a daunting stretch. Since that day, despite his reluctance, Kim SeoJoon had to train his body day in and day out, holding on to a small belief that he would grow stronger. However, after diligently studying every detail for a whole week, his progress hadn't budged at all. "It's been ages since I've exercised," Kim SeoJoon thought to himself, seizing this opportunity to justify his physical training efforts. He pushed through 300 push-ups with all his might, feeling his muscles strained to the brink. Just as he was considering switching to another exercise, he noticed the screen still showed only 81 completed push-ups. It turned out he had to maintain the exact form for each push-up to count, a truly merciless requirement. Kim SeoJoon felt tears welling up, biting his tongue in silent frustration as he labored from morning till night. Finally achieving his goal left him exhausted to the point of bleeding, yet he continued to roll and curse on the ground, under the perplexed gazes of those around him. Seriously? From now on, Kim SeoJoon has to do the exact same tasks every day and listen to lectures too? Just hearing about it makes me want to pass out. A few days later, while heading down to the hospital lobby for some exercise, Kim SeoJoon suddenly encountered an elderly woman and greeted her. On the TV nearby, there was a report about an awakened fake who had timely handled a monster's rampage thanks to their powerful abilities, which left the elderly woman incredibly excited. Feeling perplexed about how to explain his current strength to her, Kim SeoJoon was abruptly dismissed by a middle-aged man sitting nearby who callously advised him to give up. Enraged, Kim SeoJoon clenched his fists tightly. "Mind your own life before telling me what to do," he coldly retorted, walking away. Ignoring the curses muttered behind his back, Kim SeoJoon resolved to pursue his dream against all odds, fueled by his belief that he would become a professional hunter. Enduring the hardships, he continued to train day after day, while at the academy, a fierce battle raged between a spirited teacher and a ferocious giant beast, their sharp swords clashing and tearing the air apart, scattering fresh blood and dust, transforming the scene into a desolate spectacle. Kim SeoJoon finally returned home after 2 weeks of hellish ordeal, collapsing happily onto his bed. However, his mind was still troubled by concerns about the upcoming hunter exam next year. Suddenly, he jolted as he remembered completing today's daily tasks on the system, which unlocked the next lesson. Kim SeoJoon couldn't contain his joy and shouted aloud. Upon seeing Kim SeoJoon's return, Professor Chirian seemed somewhat surprised and promptly prepared the next lesson. That night, despite his reluctance, Kim SeoJoon shamelessly slipped back into the workplace to continue his duties, as he had already developed appendicitis. Now, a new financial problem had arisen. He had to work to eat, but working meant no time for lectures or daily tasks. This dilemma left Kim SeoJoon with a throbbing headache. During a rare break, he reviewed the previous day's lesson on the 5 senses and their role in combat, including sight, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. These processes were too slow for Professor Chirian, who had taught him to shorten them through instinctual intuition, his 6th sense. Lost in thought, a colleague suddenly approached from behind, attempting to grab him by the shoulder. Surprisingly, Kim SeoJoon easily dodged him as if he had eyes in the back of his head, leaving the man utterly astonished. Shortly after, Kim SeoJoon effortlessly lifted 3 200-kilogram monster clubs, despite just recovering from injury, stunning everyone present at the workplace. Feeling a surge of hidden strength within himself, Kim SeoJoon realized that waiting until work was done would leave him with little time, prompting him to decide to squat during his carrying tasks. To his surprise, the system automatically tripled his gains, proving that the heavier the load, the more effective the exercise. Kim SeoJoon understood this truth and rejoiced to the skies. In the days that followed, he seized every opportunity to work and train simultaneously, effectively earning money while saving time, a double benefit. However, the aftermath of those vigorous days left his body shattered and endlessly fatigued. Yet the results were undeniable, as he had completed all his old lessons and decided to seek out additional free courses to explore further. Unexpectedly, Kim SeoJoon stumbled upon Professor Hangwoo, a mythical figure renowned for his extraordinary abilities, viral across countless realms. Anything free was worth signing up for, Kim SeoJoon realized as he embarked on yet another exploration. Kim SeoJoon had just clicked when Hang Woo started yelling at him, leaving him stunned. He stood there listening to Hang Woo's tirade, and then the system popped up with a new task: swing a weapon 5,000 times. He was completely baffled. How could the lesson be over after just a few words? And now there was this bizarre task. Truly, cheap things are never good. The next day, Park Soo-kun, the granddaughter of the Sword Star, unexpectedly came to the construction site where Kim SeoJoon worked to check on a recent accident. Amid the frightened whispers of the workers, Kim SeoJoon heard the words Sword Star. Park Min-chun immediately felt a chill. 100 years ago, he was an awakened one, active during the birth of the gate concept. Unlike the systematic understanding of the awakened ones at that time, the monsters back then were much more ferocious and roamed the streets everywhere. Human survival was not guaranteed. Park Min-chun was an awakened one in such a world and one of those who rebuilt civilization. He was a hero who saved the world. Time flowed like water, and though he was now old, he remained a formidable force on this planet, greatly admired by Kim SeoJoon. This made him work even harder, his awkward appearance catching Park Soo-kun's attention. As usual, he tirelessly used the monsters to train his body. While chatting with his colleagues, the corpse of a monster suddenly moved and lunged at them, catching them off guard. A few minutes earlier, Park Soo-kun, surrounded by workers, had exhausted herself and hid in a dark corner. She felt she wasn't fit to be the headmistress. She overheard whispers about her abilities only being at level B, which saddened her. Seom was a revered hero, but to her, that title was a heavy burden. Despite receiving hunter training from her grandfather since she could walk, the wall bearing the name Seom was too high. She couldn't surpass it, always being compared to her exceptionally talented grandfather. Her lifelong dream was to become a teacher, but her talented grandfather extinguished it. Even though she compromised by teaching hunter trainees, once the news spread that the Hunter Academy she founded didn't have Seom's presence, all the trainees lost interest and left. They hadn't enrolled because of her, but because of Seom. She yearned to have a suitable student. While lost in thought, the sudden noise and commotion around her indicated the appearance of a monster, startling her. Kim SeoJoon and the other man were being surrounded by the ferocious beast. He could do nothing but scream in despair, watching as his cherished person fell into the jaws of death. He was paralyzed with fear, realizing that an ordinary person couldn't be stronger than a monster. Even awakened ones who couldn't use mana were no match for it. And this was a 4-star monster. Professional hunters would have a hard time defeating it. By the time Park Soo-kun arrived, it was too late. The man had only a few more seconds before he would be in the monster's mouth. Kim SeoJoon, trembling after a month of hesitation, decided to take a gamble and charge at it, fighting for his life. He created a shield, allowing the man to escape. In an instant, it was just him and the ferocious beast. Kim SeoJoon tried to calm himself, holding on until the professional hunters could arrive. Though he said this, his body continued to shake with fear. In his panic, Boljo's teachings softly echoed in his mind, bringing him a sense of calm and peace like water. His fear and trembling heart were gradually suppressed, giving him the courage to face the beast that was lunging at him. Realizing that if he waited to react, it would be too late, Kim SeoJoon acted on instinct, effortlessly dodging each of the beast's powerful blows. He then utilized Hang Woo's mountain pulling technique, targeting the monster's weak spot and striking with all his might. His staff briefly glowed, and less than a second later, a thunderous explosion shook the air. Park Soo-kun rushed over, and through the haze of dust, saw Kim SeoJoon standing confidently beside the bloodied corpse of the monster. It seemed he had successfully applied the professor's teachings. "That's my boy," she thought. "What the hell just happened here?" Park Soo-kun could not believe her eyes. Even in her wildest dreams, she couldn't imagine that a lone man, who wasn't even a hunter and didn't have any proper weapons, could accomplish such a feat using only a steel pike like Kim SeoJoon. Contrary to her bewilderment, Kim SeoJoon hurriedly brushed past her, deeply worried about his colleague. Park Soo-kun quietly observed the noisy and bustling scene of Kim SeoJoon talking with those around him. She suddenly blurted out that she had found the suitable candidate, the recruit she had been looking for. In the serene yet contemplative atmosphere, the workday came to an end under the setting sun, accompanied by the foreman's stern warning not to tell anyone about what had just happened. Kim SeoJoon briefly checked his phone and was startled to see the progress percentage of his lesson had unexpectedly increased significantly. He guessed it might be because he had defeated the monster earlier in the afternoon. It seemed that the best way to increase the lesson progress was to apply what he had learned in real combat. However, the problem was that if he couldn't join the Hunter Academy and earn a certificate, he wouldn't be able to raid dungeons. The economic burden was once again weighing heavily on his shoulders, as he needed to save money and apply. As he was deep in thought, suddenly, Park Soo-kun appeared behind him, expressing her desire to talk. As soon as he saw her, Kim SeoJoon recognized her as the granddaughter of the Sword Star, and he couldn't help but wonder why someone like her wanted to talk to him. Park Soo-kun didn't hesitate and got straight to the point. She wanted to invite him to meet her grandfather. However, contrary to her expectations, Kim SeoJoon flatly refused and walked away, leaving her bewildered. Park Soo-kun, at 31 years old, was experiencing something she had never encountered before, which made her feel slightly confused. Kim SeoJoon coldly stated that he couldn't trust an academy where none of the recruits were hers. Just hearing about it made him feel skeptical. Park Soo-kun was at a loss for words, not knowing how to explain to him. After witnessing his strange exercises and realizing that even in a significantly weakened state, he could still slay a 4-star monster, she felt that he was clearly trying to become a hunter, nothing more, nothing less. She quickly chased after him, promising advanced equipment and facilities at the academy. But he remained adamant in his refusal. Caught in a dilemma, Park Soo-kun had to play her final card, her grandfather. She immediately proposed that her grandfather teach Kim SeoJoon swordsmanship. This took Kim SeoJoon by surprise, causing him to pause momentarily. However, his answer remained a firm no. This only fueled Park Soo-kun's frustration as she watched him reject even the offer to learn from a swordmaster, a desire all professional hunters covet. Her longing to have him grew stronger with each passing moment, determined not to let him slip away easily. Park Soo-kun continued, laying out her full proposal, to help him connect with her academy, provide a private training location, and most importantly, waive his tuition fees. Kim SeoJoon was intrigued by the offer, yet with a cautious demeanor, he pondered what he could do in return. After all, in this world, one must work to earn, and nothing comes for free. What she truly wanted was for him to participate in various competitions under her academy's name, to gain recognition from others. Gradually, Kim SeoJoon started to waver under Park Soo-kun's tempting offer. Though she could solve all his worries in one go, he couldn't understand why she was going to such lengths just to recruit him under the dazzling sunset. Park Soo-kun spoke solemnly, explaining that she saw his potential, her resolute stance melting Kim SeoJoon's skepticism. Both ended up shaking hands happily. On the surface, their goal seemed singular, but beneath it lay a mutually beneficial relationship. As predicted, the next day, Kim SeoJoon received news that the head of construction had been fired. A task Park Soo-kun had taken care of for him the previous day. This news brought joy to everyone. Today, Kim SeoJoon's happiness was multiplied as he stepped into the Hunter Academy for the first time. Upon arrival at the gate, Park Soo-kun was already waiting to present him with his certificate. Kim SeoJoon accepted it, feeling a mix of surprise and accomplishment. Although he hadn't yet become a professional hunter, this was just the first step on his journey toward achieving his dream. Before proceeding with Kim SeoJoon's training, as per Park Soo-kun's instructions, he had to first select a weapon to prepare for entering the dungeon. She had already prepared a shiny one for him, and he had chosen one himself, as they ventured into this dark rat's nest of a dungeon. Inside were only level 2 monsters, a perfect spot for someone inexperienced like him to test his mettle. Suddenly, a nimble rat monster rushed at them, but Kim SeoJoon swiftly dodged and immediately swung his club, knocking the creature out cold. After a brief scuffle, Kim SeoJoon was delighted to see his progress steadily increasing. It seemed this place suited him well. He could both enhance his strength and earn money, akin to grinding experience in a game, which excited him every time. Park Soo-kun couldn't help but wonder if she had chosen the wrong person. She knew he was eccentric, but after returning from clearing out the dungeon, he was back to burying his head in his phone, reading nonsense. It was her first time encountering such behavior from him. Seeing Kim SeoJoon through Soo-kun's eyes, he seemed like a patient escaping from a hospital. She wondered how long he had been staring at that pitch-black screen, and the big issue was his bizarre capabilities didn't end there. Despite being a raw recruit, having never undergone proper training, Kim SeoJoon could massacre rat monsters like a seasoned hunter on his first dungeon sweep, despite his over 10 years of training. It left her speechless. After handling the scene, he continued with more bizarre exercises, like moving corpses, a task easily handled by a hired service. It was beyond her wildest imagination. At present, what worried Park Soo-kun the most was how to explain his appearance to her grandfather. She sighed heavily, hearing Kim SeoJoon's frustrated screams in the wee hours, as he hadn't finished listening to all the lectures. Truly, the situation was becoming increasingly complicated. The next day, Kim SeoJoon grinned widely in front of his early morning account screen, where his hard work had paid off. It wasn't in vain. However, he briefly felt that cleaning up like this wasted time. While listening to the lecture, Kim SeoJoon suddenly wondered whether to ask his colleague, Manchul, to work together, considering the nearly $10,000 he had just earned. He hesitated about what to do with it. The dungeon sweep had helped him earn money and improve his lecture progress, but it wasn't as fast as he had hoped. Suddenly, in a moment of reflection, Kim SeoJoon remembered the legendary lecture about Weakling Daeseong. Excitedly, he clicked the registration button. But oh boy, it was too good to be true. It shot up to a whopping $27 million. It made him want to cry and smash his phone. Goodness, it was truly a capitalist nightmare, perfectly matching the name of the Supreme Academy. With this price tag, even after becoming a professional hunter, he would still be deep in debt. Kim SeoJoon sighed in frustration, cried a bit, and finally regained his spirits. He continued to browse the site to see if there were any good items for sale. After some searching, he gasped in amazement when he saw that everything imaginable was available. Holy water! Even a replica of St. Longinus' spear, all legendary grade equipment. It left even someone like him, who knew nothing about weapons, in awe. Thinking about how such extraordinary items could be bought and sold so easily, Kim SeoJoon's eyes lit up like headlights. Without hesitation, he immediately clicked to purchase St. Longinus' spear. However, that was just his plan. Whether he could afford it or not was another story. Everything happened in one go. The $100,000 figure appeared successfully, boosting his enthusiasm for training even more. It was a whole different story altogether. Kim SeoJoon was in silent tears at this point, overwhelmed by where all this money had come from. That lecture by Weakling Daeseong, priced at $27 million, it seemed he'd have to wait until his next life to see it. Park Soo-kun chuckled awkwardly, approaching him to hand over a document about the Academy race, a competition among various hunting academies where countless students showcased their peak abilities. She explained that these academy races were at the level 4 tournament grade, offering opportunities to qualify for higher-level competitions and government endorsements. Therefore, hunting academies spared no expense in sending their most talented students to compete. Park Soo-kun's intention was clear as she grinned broadly, inviting Kim SeoJoon to participate on behalf of her hunting academy. Kim SeoJoon hesitated for a moment, but agreed to give it a try, curious about what lay ahead. This decision delighted Park Soo-kun immensely. Although she didn't know the exact details of the race, Kim SeoJoon's performance would be evaluated based on his dungeon clearance points and his performance in the Junior Hunter Tournament. Yet Kim SeoJoon couldn't help feeling uncertain about his own abilities, especially compared to other junior hunters who had far more combat experience with monsters than he did. Reflecting for a moment, he proposed teaming up with Park Soo-kun to see how they would fare together. Being the grade B hunter trained by a renowned figure like Kim Tin, Park Soo-kun's hidden strength intrigued him. Both of them prepared themselves thoroughly for the upcoming challenge. Park Soo-kun quickly noticed Kim SeoJoon's swift, but somewhat clumsy attacks, making it easy for her to anticipate his moves. Her expectations began to diminish slightly. However, when she swung her sword to end the match and revealed his weaknesses, Kim SeoJoon surprisingly managed to block her powerful mana charge strike effortlessly within moments. Despite struggling with the force behind it, Kim SeoJoon calmly held his ground. Park Soo-kun was astonished, unable to believe that he could deflect her mana-charged attack. Normally, his weapon should have been knocked out of his hands, allowing her to press her sword against his neck. That was the expected scenario. Yet, under Park Soo-kun's bewildered gaze, Kim SeoJoon smiled faintly, then swiftly countered with a strike of his own, demonstrating a sudden surge of speed and precision that caught Park Soo-kun off guard, leaving her momentarily staggered. Kim SeoJoon, caught up in the heat of battle, suddenly heard a voice in his head instructing him to quickly change tactics and employed various combat techniques, both offensive and defensive, including different ways to wield his staff, all in meticulous detail. At the moment, Kim SeoJoon launched a full-force attack. Park Soo-kun, overwhelmed with fear, also exerted all her strength to counter with a loud roar. The result was a devastating scene where both ended up defeated, with Kim SeoJoon lying bloodied and unconscious in a corner. Park Soo-kun gasped in horror, realizing the severity of the situation. She rushed over to check on him, and Kim SeoJoon slowly regained consciousness, embarrassedly scratching his head and rubbing his arm. Unable to believe he had lost to her like that. He wondered if this was really the level of a grade B hunter and a junior hunter, feeling he still had a long way to go before reaching the professional hunter status he aspired to. Checking his phone, Kim SeoJoon was relieved to find that his score had increased as expected. It seemed he would have to bother Park Soo-kun again for more battles in the future, and she'd, of course, agreed readily, mentioning the prize money of $100,000 from the competition. This sparked a fire within Kim SeoJoon, igniting a determination to train relentlessly, driven by an intense desire to win that even Park Soo-kun couldn't match. 2 weeks passed swiftly, and today was the day of the tournament. The venue was bustling with activity, filled with participants including an odd bespectacled guy nervously muttering to himself. He seemed out of place but was there to compete. After a brief meal in the waiting room, he nervously fidgeted, his limbs colliding awkwardly, his body stiff as a rock. Observing the scene around him, including muscular competitors and their formidable weapons, the odd guy suddenly remembered Kim SeoJoon, the guy with the shabby weapon and makeshift armor, looking rather pitiful compared to the rest. This image stuck in his mind as he marveled at the surroundings, growing increasingly astonished by Kim SeoJoon's peculiar presence. Others in the vicinity also began to notice Kim SeoJoon's unusual demeanor, sparking discussions and whispers among them about his distinctiveness. Kim SeoJoon, still not quite grasping what was going on around him, continued to watch the unfolding events with an expression that perfectly mirrored the iron care standard he set for himself. His scholarly demeanor seemed to invoke sympathy from Lee Minji, a 19-year-old who suddenly felt a sense of camaraderie, akin to finding a fellow student in a new class who no one else wanted to engage with. Lee Minji quickly introduced himself after a few pleasantries, revealing that the two people arguing loudly nearby were Jang Dukchuk from the Gocheer Academy, known for his immense strength, and Lee Chulmin from the Mint Academy. Kim SeoJoon, still bewildered, couldn't fathom why he was being asked for this information, feeling as though the heavens were raining down strange queries upon him. The argument subsided abruptly when Lee Janon from the Revenant Academy spoke up, his mere voice silencing the room as he recounted being the reigning champion of the tournament, boasting about his formidable strength. He had previously declined Park Soo-kun's invitation to join her, which left him furious and pounding tables and chairs in frustration, regretting his missed opportunity to leverage her support. Sensing Kim SeoJoon's curious gaze fixed upon him, Lee Junon's agitation grew, but Kim SeoJoon was merely pondering how many points he might gain if he were to challenge him. Lost in thought, the announcement suddenly blared that the matches were about to commence, heightening the crowd's anticipation. In a moment of clarity, Kim SeoJoon stood up abruptly and walked towards the window. Reflecting on the past 2 weeks of preparation, he realized he had achieved only about 30% of his learning goal, feeling a lack of noticeable strength gains or practical experience compared to other junior hunters. However, he reassured himself that his dungeon raids and battles with Park Soo-kun had compensated for this gap. Gripping his hands tightly, Kim SeoJoon resolved to surpass all challenges, envisioning the $100,000 prize straight into his Google account. Despite his initial hesitation, he seemed determined to face whatever trials lay ahead in the labyrinthine dungeon competition. As the announcement echoed once again, signaling the imminent start of the dungeon maze competition, Kim SeoJoon couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. It seemed the odds were already stacked against him from the very beginning. The first round of the official tournament begins amidst the cheers and excitement of the audience below. The initial round of the tournament is a labyrinth dungeon race, with the rules prohibiting attacks on other contestants and requiring participants to escape the maze. This simple requirement puzzles the audience because even in the lowest level tournament, escaping a maze shouldn't be so straightforward as to rely solely on luck. There is speculation that there might be monsters within the maze, and participants must hunt them down to find a way out, thus creating a test of the most important skill of hunters: dungeon crawling. On the large screen, the menacing image of Lee Jun-on with his deadly gaze, relentlessly wielding his sword and covered in blood, resonates with the lively cheers of the audience. Amidst all this, no one notices Park Soo-kun sneaking into the scene to assess the situation. Lee Jun-on's presence in the tournament surprises Soo-kun, triggering immediate concern for Kim SeoJoon's safety. Meanwhile, Kim SeoJoon himself struggles intensely within the darn maze, its walls as hard as stone, regretting not having mastered the mountain-crushing techniques taught by his teacher. After wandering for what seems like an eternity, Kim SeoJoon suddenly encounters a crossroads where he anticipates following the basic rule of maze navigation, keeping one hand on the wall and continuing in that direction. Strangely, however, something inside him suggests going in the opposite direction compared to his initial inclination. Initially skeptical, Kim SeoJoon starts to trust his sixth sense, which seems to have been influenced by Chirion's teachings on intuition. Embracing a bold approach, Kim SeoJoon begins to rely on his instincts, wondering how accurate they'll be as announcements of eliminated candidates continuously echo around him. To his surprise, the path Kim SeoJoon chooses turns out to be remarkably obstacle-free, almost eerily so, sparking his suspicion that his intuition might even be steering him clear of monsters. Lost in thoughts about his newfound abilities, Kim SeoJoon is startled by Minji's voice, a reminder of the annoying encounter with the self-proclaimed strategist. Despite Minji's attempts to guide him with information he already knew, Kim SeoJoon remains inclined to follow his instincts, uncertain whether to feel pleased or annoyed by being categorized similarly weak as Minji. Upon seeing a photo of Minji's sister, Kim SeoJoon concludes that it's better for him to go solo, expressing relief at the thought of not encountering Minji again. With that, he swiftly turns on his heels and walks away. Minji scurries around the courtyard, incessantly whining and cleaning, making Kim SeoJoon uncomfortable. Suddenly, she reveals that her parents have passed away, triggering Kim SeoJoon's old painful memories to resurface abruptly. Seeing Kim SeoJoon standing there, Minji becomes increasingly puzzled, and he unexpectedly feels a twinge of sympathy, agreeing to let Minji accompany him. This decision leaves Minji speechless as she watches Kim SeoJoon confidently stride along every path as if he already knows the way, causing her to feel unsettled. Exhausted, she reluctantly follows him as they reach a dead end. Without hesitation, Kim SeoJoon raises his hand straight ahead of them, igniting a burst of light and countless lively sounds. Indeed, they successfully escape the maze in an astonishing 6 minutes, prompting the crowd to cheer ecstatically in disbelief. Since their encounter, Minji remains stunned and mentally shaken. She had merely stumbled upon Kim SeoJoon by chance and had intended to collaborate to escape the maze. However, how did he manage to secure first place in just 27 minutes? The murmurs and gossiping surrounding him do not faze Kim SeoJoon, who calmly sits and watches a lecture on his phone, oblivious to Lee Jun-on's simmering hostility approaching him. Unbeknownst to him, Lee Jun-on glances over Kim SeoJoon, provoking his confusion. With a mocking smile, Lee Jun-on turns away from the crowd, suggesting that Kim SeoJoon's success was just pure luck. Despite the commotion, Kim SeoJoon remains unperturbed, seemingly indifferent to the attention. As the competition's rules for the second round are announced, partner battles to maintain fairness in this Grade 4 tournament, all mana-containing weapons are banned. Reflecting briefly, Kim SeoJoon notes that 32 contestants have advanced from the first round, typical for such one-on-one matchups. However, just as pairings are about to commence, someone raises their hand, forfeiting their place due to fear, leaving Kim SeoJoon in despair. Outside the dazzling stadium under the scorching sun, Kim SeoJoon contemplates leaving when suddenly, a noisy crowd arguing about betting catches Minji's attention. Most are placing their bets on Lee Junon, likely because who would dare wager on an inexperienced recruit like him? At this moment, an enigmatic woman appeared, carrying a suitcase with $1 million, to place a bet on Kim SeoJoon. This act of high-stakes gambling sent the crowd into a frenzy, astonished by such audacious betting. Just minutes before, among Kim SeoJoon's cadets, a wave of fear surged through them after hearing rumors about Lee Junon and other high-ranking soldiers. Panic set in, and many hastily withdrew from the competition, leaving only 5 resolute young men. The teams were thus evenly split. Kim SeoJoon paired with Jang Duk-chuk, while Lee Junon joined Min Ji, with Lee Chul-min left out and subsequently excused. Kim SeoJoon pondered briefly about the possibility of securing first place in the finals if they won both rounds. Meanwhile, he noticed Min Ji trembling and tearfully determined not to give up, which made him chuckle. The time for the competition arrived. Kim SeoJoon calmly stood up and walked out, his composed demeanor leaving Min Ji speechless. The crowd buzzed with excitement, cheering for the next round featuring Kim SeoJoon and Jang Duk-chuk, the Academy's giant from Gocheon. As the match began, Jang Duk-chuk charged forward with full force, only to be met by Kim SeoJoon's arrogant gaze. In the waiting room, Min Ji shivered not only for herself but also for him, especially intimidated by Lee Junon's ominous expression. Just as Min Ji considered giving up, the screen displayed Kim SeoJoon's victory, revitalizing her with newfound courage, dispelling her earlier fears. A few minutes prior, while Duk-chuk relentlessly swung his sword with all his might, Kim SeoJoon effortlessly dodged each strike, as if it were child's play. This gradually exhausted Duk-chuk. Eventually, after a series of forceful attacks, he unleashed his final move, only to be swiftly defeated by Kim SeoJoon's counterattack. Duk-chuk, shocked and trembling, collapsed in defeat at Kim SeoJoon's feet. Despite his victory, Kim SeoJoon frowned as he checked his phone, realizing that his stats had only slightly improved despite his efforts. With the deadline approaching and progress lagging, he recognized the urgency of his situation. At this pace, he wouldn't be able to complete not only his teacher's lessons, but also those from Chai Ryun and Cheong Yu in time, risking financial ruin unless he purchased a weapon and a free pass to avoid monetary depletion. Kim SeoJoon had no choice but to win the prize money. He sighed as he dragged his tired body into the room. Min Ji had been waiting for him and enthusiastically congratulated him. The second match then began. Contrary to Min Ji's fear, Lee Junon was brimming with arrogant confidence, if not outright conceit. Trembling, Min Ji spoke up, saying that from the moment he saw Kim SeoJoon, he had felt a sense of familiarity with him. Because of this, when Kim SeoJoon defeated Duk-chuk, Min Ji felt as happy as if he had won himself, although a bit envious too, knowing he was always unlucky and untalented. But the heart of a person who wanted his sister to be proud would always guide him. Finally, it was Min Ji's turn to enter the field. Kim SeoJoon silently watched his small figure, hoping that they both would meet in the finals. Min Ji's lack of self-encouraging muttering made Lee Junon annoyed. He gathered all his strength and aimed at Min Ji, full of confidence, thinking Min Ji was just a useless fool, a creature at the bottom of the food chain compared to a predator like him. With thoughts of superiority, believing himself to be on a different level, seeing Min Ji tremblingly pointing his sword at him, made Lee Junon laugh even more. The signal whistle for the match to begin sounded without hesitation. Lee Junon seemed to have been waiting for this moment, aggressively swinging his sword at Min Ji, making him desperately block the attacks. His whole body was already tense. Suddenly, a fiery punch to the abdomen caused Min Ji to collapse in pain, blood gushing from his mouth, unable to stand up. He had long known that he was no match for Lee Junon, In his distress, Minji thought of Kim SeoJoon like a source of spiritual strength and tried to stand up. He wanted to give it his all, even though it was as easy as turning a hand for Lee Junon. Minji still wanted his attack to reach him. With that thought, he wildly swung his sword. After a cold sound echoed, Lee Junon officially won. Under his feet lay Minji, who had collapsed at some point. There was only one thing that Lee Junon knew. Minji's sword had grazed his face, leaving a small cut that wounded his pride. In front of the cheering crowd, Lee Junon didn't hesitate to stomp on Minji's head and shouted that people like him were nothing but trash in this competition. The situation grew increasingly tense. Just as Lee Junon was about to trample Minji repeatedly, Kim SeoJoon swung his sword and appeared just in time. He had been planning to wait until the finals to face Lee Junon, but he couldn't stand it anymore. Someone deserved to be dealt with right then and there. The two young men stared at each other intensely, their eyes filled with hostility. Amidst the spectators eagerly awaiting a dramatic showdown, Lee Junon wanted Kim SeoJoon to let go of his friend. But Kim SeoJoon demanded that Lee Junon remove his foot from Minji's head first. Annoyed, Lee Junon pressed down harder on Minji's head, making Kim SeoJoon seethe with rage. Without a second thought, Kim SeoJoon swung his staff and knocked Lee Junon aside, then lifted Minji up, creating a touching scene that made Lee Junon grit his teeth in irritation. Lee Junon despised insects that didn't know their place, especially those like Minji who harbored unrealistic dreams. The verbal sparring between him and Kim SeoJoon escalated, making the atmosphere increasingly suffocating. The audience began to murmur, but the organizers, following orders from above, were reluctant to intervene. They could only watch as a disaster unfolded. Turning to Kim SeoJoon, Lee Junon sneered arrogantly, proclaiming that in this world, the strong will always win, and there is no place for dreamers and fools like him. These words stunned Kim SeoJoon because he used to think the same way. During the 9 years he endured to become a super hunter, he had often faced harsh realities. Kim SeoJoon had once been someone with nothing. No talent, no money, barely making ends meet despite hard work, questioning himself hundreds of times about what would have happened if he had given up and done something else. Despite the fear that held him back, making him doubt himself and afraid to face reality, it wasn't a reason to allow Lee Junon to humiliate him and call him trash. Just as he finished speaking, despite the warnings about possibly violating the violence rules, Kim SeoJoon swung his staff like the wind and lunged at Lee Junon. But with his inherent strength, Lee Junon blocked it instantly. The two clashed, their fight shaking the ground. Lee Junon's power was anything but gentle, causing Kim SeoJoon to falter slightly under his fierce attacks. Kim SeoJoon reminded himself that he could not afford to lose, for this was not the time. What he needed to do now was go with the flow and move based on instinct. With a quick strike to Lee Junon's chest, he managed to throw him off balance momentarily. Enraged, Lee Junon aimed his sword directly at him. Although Lee Junon was a natural predator, the sharp look in Kim SeoJoon's eyes made him wary. Regaining his composure, Lee Junon charged at Kim SeoJoon once more. This time, Kim SeoJoon adeptly blocked each of his moves, his speed and strength increasing with each strike. Lee Junon felt as if he was facing a furious beast, ready to pounce on him in a moment of weakness. In a sudden move, Kim SeoJoon knocked him back with a powerful blow from his staff, a humiliating defeat for Lee Junon. Furious, Lee Junon drew a magical sword, causing Kim SeoJoon to panic. Without the ability to control mana, he would never win. Fueled by envy and rage, Lee Junon tightly gripped the brightly burning sword, preparing to strike Kim SeoJoon. Amid the alarmed cries from the crowd, Kim SeoJoon realized that running away would be the best option. But for some reason, his body didn't obey. His mind screamed that if he ran, everything he had worked for would be in vain. Suddenly, Kim SeoJoon remembered his teacher's words, to always try his best, because the worst defeat is losing to oneself. The key was to trust himself and fight with everything he had. Even if he lost, he would have fought valiantly. With this strong mental support, Kim SeoJoon turned and charged at Lee Junon, completely contrary to his expectations. making him livid with rage. All his hatred and anger focused into a single powerful strike at Kim SeoJoon. The clash shook the heavens and earth. Dust and smoke billowed, leaving the audience in suspense, wondering who had won. A figure collapsed, and it was none other than Lee Junon, with blood streaming from the corners of his mouth. Beside him, Kim SeoJoon was panting heavily, his breaths mingling with the air, unable to speak. And so, Kim SeoJoon had successfully defeated Lee Junon. The crowd erupted into cheers. The entire arena seemed ready to explode with excitement at what had just transpired. Their idol, Lee Junon, had been bested by Kim SeoJoon, lying flattened like a shrimp on the ground. The crowd sang praises of Kim SeoJoon, incessantly chanting his name. Up in the stands, SeoJoon was about to faint. Just 2 weeks ago, she had seen him struggling with a sword imbued with mana, and now he could create such intense energy strikes. It was unbelievable. As she glanced to the side, she noticed the mysterious person cloaked in a heavy robe, who seemed utterly shocked that Kim SeoJoon had won. His extreme reaction, as if a long-standing natural law had been broken, made Park SeoJoon suspicious. She remembered clearly that he had bet on Kim SeoJoon to win. She looked again, but he had vanished like foam on the sea. The sunset slowly descended upon the exhausted body of Kim SeoJoon as he walked away, reflecting on what had just happened. The organizers informed him that he had been disqualified for intervening in the match, even though it wasn't an official fight, and for ignoring the referee's warnings. Thus, he was deemed to have violated the rules. As for Lee Junon, his use of the enchanted sword revealed his intent to kill his opponent, so he was banned from participating in the Super Hunter exams for the next 5 years. Ultimately, the organizers declared Lee Chulman the winner of the tournament, with Minji in second place and Jang Dukchuk somehow reaching third place. Kim SeoJoon felt that the outcome was surreal, but he didn't care. After all, his learning had significantly progressed. His learning speed had skyrocketed during his fight with Lee Junon. Notably, his learning speed had surpassed 50%, perhaps due to the strange spiritual energy he had felt earlier. While engrossed in scrolling through his phone to find new lessons, SeoJoon suddenly appeared behind Kim SeoJoon, startling him. She gently inquired about how he was doing now. Upon hearing Kim SeoJoon apologize for intervening in the match, thus losing the chance to win, SeoJoon felt somewhat uneasy. At that moment, she was genuinely concerned only about his well-being, as the prize money was no longer a concern. Kim SeoJoon, now recalling the incident, sighed deeply in frustration, and sorrowfully lamented how all his planned purchases had gone up in smoke like a gust of wind. He had to bid farewell to his beloved Long Guinness staff and move on to the next course. However, despite everything, Kim SeoJoon sighed and said, "If I say I don't regret it, that would be a lie. But if I hadn't intervened earlier, I might have regretted it even more." SeoJoon listened to him and felt somewhat relieved. They conversed amiably until Minji suddenly rushed over from a distance, a white bandage wrapped around an unhealed wound on his head. Seeing that Kim SeoJoon was about to leave, Minji gathered his courage and expressed his admiration, saying he wanted to become someone like him if he continued to work hard. These words, like claws lightly scratching at Kim SeoJoon's sensitive heart, touched him deeply. Faced with Minji's teary-eyed expression on the verge of crying, Kim SeoJoon suddenly became stern and cautioned him that it might be very difficult to achieve such dreams and ideals in today's world. He advised Minji not to overly fixate on becoming a hunter, as there were still many other opportunities for young people like him. Hearing these words from Kim SeoJoon, all the sadness in Minji's heart instantly dissipated. He quickly thanked Kim SeoJoon and turned away, deeply moved. From behind, Kim SeoJoon softly called out words of encouragement, urging Minji not to let others' thoughtless remarks belittle himself and to confidently pursue whatever he wanted to do. Minji's eyes reflected his gratitude as he bid an emotionally charged farewell to Kim SeoJoon under the faint afternoon sunlight. It was the first time Park SeoJoon had seen Kim SeoJoon with such profound depth, which surprised her. She was further delighted to hear him refer to their academy, making her immensely happy. Without delay, She invited Kim SeoJoon to visit the workshop of their teacher to receive a weapon as a gift. In a distant temple far from the city center, SeoJoon, a sharp-witted sword saint, intruded into the room where the venerable master of swordsmanship, Park Min-chun, was meditating. His sudden presence angered the old sword sage, who felt suffocated under the pressure of his labored breathing. SeoJoon bluntly mentioned that SeoJoon had recently participated in the Academy's tournament and seemed to have recruited a new student. These words successfully piqued the curiosity of the sword saint, Park Min-chun, prompting him to personally visit and observe Kim SeoJoon, wanting to see what kind of person he was. Observing Kim SeoJoon diligently day by day, striving to accomplish his tasks to achieve his dreams and afford equipment, made SeoJoon squint her eyes. Clearly, she had led him to the shop, but Kim SeoJoon, with his picky nature, ended up not buying anything at all. Indeed, there seemed to be a real issue here. Kim SeoJoon's face turned green as he couldn't believe she read him like an open book. He was simply dissatisfied with ordinary weapons after laying eyes on those crafted by one of the superlative artisans. Recalling the matter of escalating prices made Kim SeoJoon realize that it might be the influence of the law of karma. If money wasn't truly earned through hard work, it might not be available when needed. SeoJoon curiously questioned how Kim SeoJoon managed to control mana so effectively, noting his ability demonstrated in battling monsters. Kim SeoJoon indeed had the ability to control mana naturally, despite never practicing any mana technique. He remembered that mana manipulation was a technique designed to enable the effective control and use of mana, divided into high-level and low-level for different skill sets. Each hunter had a specific mana manipulation technique that came with a patent for it. This was also the reason why Kim SeoJoon worked hard to study in a higher education environment, such as the Hunter Academy. SeoJoon told him that her grandfather had absolutely forbidden her from learning those techniques at school. Instead, she could teach techniques she had invented herself, which surprised Kim SeoJoon. He didn't expect her to have such talent. However, after thinking it over, Kim SeoJoon realized she was right. Training techniques were fundamental for a hunter, and he felt the first major difference was whether one could use mana or not, as he had experienced in his recent battle with Lee Jun-on. Now with some free time, Kim SeoJoon thought learning about mana would be beneficial. In a harsh world governed by the law of causality, mana was the way to rise up and defy the world's rules. Once SeoJoon left, Kim SeoJoon immediately took out his phone and started watching lectures on mana by the great mage Merlin. After watching for a while, he was eager to start. The mage explained that each person had to discover their own mana, which left Kim SeoJoon feeling a bit overwhelmed. He focused his energy and concentration, using the sensory skills he had learned from his teacher. His body was able to sense and manipulate mana clearly, but he couldn't shape it into a form. Recalling the mage's earlier explanation, he remembered that transforming mana was like forming a halo. Concentrating all his strength, he compressed it. Before long, with a soft sound, he unexpectedly created a mana stone. The success was beyond his imagination. Although it was small, he reassured himself that he would become more proficient over time. Suddenly, a voice behind him startled Kim SeoJoon. The person was none other than Sword Saint Park Min-chun. He had come to see who the new student at the academy was and was astonished to witness Kim SeoJoon create a mana stone by himself. Although slow, it was clear that he was a genius, as it was very difficult to do. The fact that a genius like Kim SeoJoon was attending Park SeoJoon's academy made Park Min-chun suspicious that he was targeting his granddaughter. With a stern and intimidating aura, he asked for Kim SeoJoon's name. Kim SeoJoon, without a trace of fear, quickly introduced himself. He had never expected SeoJoon's father to show up here, immediately informing him that she had already left. This caused the expression on SeoJoon's father's face to darken with each passing moment. Park Min-chun stared at him intently, his hostility emanating steadily since earlier, enough to make Kim SeoJoon freeze unless he was an S-class hunter. Yet Kim SeoJoon remained seemingly unfazed, prompting suspicion from others. He looked around nervously, still not understanding the man's intentions. At this point, Park Min-chun could no longer contain his calm demeanor. He drew his sword and advanced towards Kim SeoJoon, his demeanor filled with rage that made him tremble with fear. Kim SeoJoon tried to explain, but it seemed Park Min-chun wasn't willing to listen. With a swift motion, a burst of energy surged from Park Min-chun's hand, causing Kim SeoJoon to fall back in sheer terror. Meanwhile, SeoJoon had come to meet her father to discuss Kim SeoJoon, but had missed him, leaving her somewhat disappointed. Little did she expect her father to be at the academy, intending to confront Kim SeoJoon. When SeoJoon unexpectedly encountered Seo Mu-chul, her father's bodyguard, she was overjoyed. Just as she was trying to contact him to inquire about her father's whereabouts, Seo Mu-chul's smile faded instantly. He revealed that her father was already at the academy, intending to confront Kim SeoJoon, which struck fear in SeoJoon's heart. As soon as she heard this, SeoJoon turned and fled back, fearing for Kim SeoJoon's safety. Knowing her father's temper, she feared the worst and didn't want them to meet alone. Park SeoJoon's worries seemed to come too late, as Kim SeoJoon and Park Min-chun were already in a tense standoff. Suddenly realizing that Park Min-chun was wielding his sword but hadn't yet unsheathed it, Kim SeoJoon understood that he was being blocked rather than attacked. Trying to explain, Kim SeoJoon trembled with confusion and embarrassment, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. However, his opponent remained unconvinced, fueled by anger that culminated in a direct confrontation with Kim SeoJoon, who fought back with all his might, utterly exhausted. Park Min-chun, now seeming almost mad, was enveloped in a dense dark aura, convinced that Kim SeoJoon was nothing but a liar. His stern demeanor forced Kim SeoJoon to surrender, admitting defeat, realizing that despite Park Min-chun's menacing appearance, he didn't intend to kill him. If he had, Kim SeoJoon would already be dead. The moment he sensed his presence, Jaekyun Daeseong, the Sword Saint, stood before him. Kim SeoJoon realized that the person in front of him was the closest to his ideal image, making him understand that this was a tremendous opportunity for himself. Without hesitating any longer, Kim SeoJoon lightly swung his sword, startling Park Min-chun with his momentum. Over the past decades, Park Min-chun had encountered countless hunters, but only one person continued to fight fiercely even after facing him, and that was Kim SeoJoon. The love for his granddaughter always filled his heart, making Park Min-chun charge forward swiftly and powerfully, causing Kim SeoJoon to struggle and brace himself in mid-air. As he opened his eyes slightly, he saw a massive killing intent rushing towards him, making him break out in a cold sweat. However, a resilient legend like Kim SeoJoon would never give up. Despite the overwhelming killing intent, he continued to swing his sword, but was ultimately pushed back by Park Min-chun, falling flat. Kim SeoJoon sensed that there was something he could not easily overlook. The only chance he had now, especially when Park Min-chun was still holding back, made him stubbornly get back up, determined to end this in one more strike. His entire body was continuously battered by Park Min-chun, but he recalled the teachings from the wizard's lecture. Kim SeoJoon mustered all his strength, launching his staff with full force. After a series of thick clouds of dust, he was severely beaten, unable to get up. Even at this point, Kim SeoJoon kept calling out SeoJoon's name, which irritated Park Min-chun, making his rage flare up again as he continued to beat Kim SeoJoon. Fortunately, SeoJoon arrived just in time, and Park Min-chun finally calmed down and stopped. Seeing Kim SeoJoon's face swollen and bruised, and watching the two bicker like children, SeoJoon felt a headache coming on. She had never seen anyone dare to argue with the Sword Saint like Kim SeoJoon. Park Min-chun's excessive behavior today made SeoJoon both angry and embarrassed for Kim SeoJoon's suffering. She then awkwardly bowed her head and apologized to him, making Kim SeoJoon a bit flustered. Kim SeoJoon looked up and saw Park Min-chun's gaze, understanding that he wanted to speak privately with her. With that, he quickly made an excuse about going to the hospital and slipped away, leaving SeoJoon feeling somewhat grateful for his understanding. After he left, she slowly turned around to face her grandfather directly, coldly stating that she wanted to have a clear conversation with him, despite feeling incredibly tense inside. Suddenly, Park Min-chun spoke first, saying that Kim SeoJoon was very suspicious. His dismissive words, "What do you know?" brought back all of Sukun's old grievances. She had to endure these imposing words from her grandfather for all 31 years of her life. Even at the Hunter Academy, she couldn't escape from him, as he always caused trouble whenever she had new students, driving them all away. She understood why her grandfather acted this way and the motives behind everyone's visit. That was why she couldn't stop them when they wanted to leave. However, Kim SeoJoon was different. She didn't want to lose him. With that thought, she angrily shouted as if directly in his face, "I don't want to." All her long suppressed grievances exploded today. Sukun cried and screamed, stating that this was her academy and she wouldn't follow his wishes anymore. Though they didn't create any precious memories together and she didn't have special feelings for him, she felt something strange whenever she saw Kim SeoJoon. It made her want to stay with him longer, even though she didn't understand why. She furiously declared that she couldn't live under his shadow any longer because she never wanted to in the first place. Without letting him respond, she turned around, opened the door, and walked out, leaving behind a stunned Park Min-chun. It was the first time he saw his granddaughter express such a strong opinion. Memories of that fateful day came rushing back to him, the day his son died in the dungeon explosion. Since then, he had taken in Sukun, who was left alone. He decided to give her the strength to protect herself, which was why he was so strict, even though she didn't like swordsmanship and only wanted to be a teacher. Despite forcing her over the years, he knew her feelings were suppressed, but he intentionally ignored it. Only now did he understand the consequences of rebellion.